Right. Thank you very much. Good morning, everyone. We're going to go ahead and get started with the Joint Full Committee, Finance, Ways and Means this morning. And hopefully you were able to drive in safely and the snow didn't impede you and things are not too bad out there. Why don't we, can we have the committee secretary please call the roll?
Assemblywoman Benitez Thompson.
Here.
Assemblyman Frierson.
Here.
Assemblywoman Gorlow.
Here.
Assemblyman Hafen.
Here.
Assemblywoman Howdigi.
Here.
Assemblyman Levitt. Assemblyman Miller. Assemblywoman Miller.
Here. Here.
Assemblywoman Monroe Moreno.
Here.
Assemblywoman Peters.
Here.
Assemblyman Roberts.
I'm here, sorry.
Assemblywoman Titus.
Here.
Assemblyman Watts.
Here.
Senator Canizaro. Senator Dennis. Senator Dondero Loop.
Here.
Senator Goycochea.
Here.
Senator Hammond.
Here.
Senator Kiekefer.
Here.
Senator Ratty.
Here.
Senator Severs-Gansert.
Here.
Assemblywoman Carlton.
Here.
Chair Brooks.
Excuse me, Chair Brooks, and I'm not sure if I missed my name, but I don't believe it was called. This is Assemblywoman Tolles.
Assemblywoman Tolles.
Here.
All right. This is Vice Chair Dennis. So I mark them as they get here. I know that Chair Brooks is doing a presentation in another committee, so he'll be here shortly. So thank you. All right. So just reminder to everyone, keep muted when you're not talking. Also, if you have any questions, there is the Teams thing that you can use. Also, I can see the screen too. So if you raise your hand and I'm not seeing you on the one, I can call on you that way also. And there is opportunity to participate. You just have to go on to Nellis and register, and it'll give you the instructions and the phone number that you use to call in when we get to public comment. And we're limiting public comment to 2 minutes. And with that, we're going to go ahead and start. We have several presentations today. We're going to start with the first budget, which is the Office for New Americans budget. So we'll have them do their presentation. They'll come forward.
Morning, everyone. Hi, good morning, everyone. I'm Sherina Diaz's Director for the Governor's Office for New Americans, or ONA. Alongside with me today is Margarita Salas Crespo. I'm Senior Advisor for the office. First off, it is our pleasure to be in front of you all today for this presentation, and we are happy to answer any questions that will arise from this. In this presentation, we will outline what the Office for New Americans has done from its inception with the budget we have been appropriated and what we intend to do in the next biennium. Next slide, Maggie. So the statutory power of ONA comes from NRS 223-900 to NRS 223-930, which of course was passed through the 2019 legislative session. Immigrants and refugees are integral to the state of Nevada and are inextricably linked in the fabric and success of our state. So with that said, it is the mission of this office to facilitate the civic, social, and economic inclusion and integration of immigrants and refugees in the state and help foster opportunities for economic self-sufficiency. We envision an even more welcoming Nevada where everyone, including new Americans, can thrive and prosper. So currently, our office is 3 positions. 2 are generally fund appropriated, which is my position as the director, and an administrative assistant 2. The management analyst 2 position, who serves as ONA senior advisor, which Ms. Salas Crespo currently holds, is funded through a private grant. For context, I started as senior advisor in this office in March of last year in the middle of the pandemic, at the start of the pandemic, and appointed director in July of the same year. Ms. Salas Crespo started as senior advisor in October of last year. So the AA2 remains unfilled because of the budget cuts brought about by the pandemic. To fill this gap, we have partnered with Workforce Connections, Southern Nevada's local workforce development board, and their one-stop delivery system to hire a paid intern through their WIOA-funded WEX or Work Experience program. We hope to partner with them again in the future as that internship has ended. Additionally, we are looking into other partnerships to fund intern positions in our office as well. Next slide. So before we go into what ONA has done since its inception in 2019, please allow us to give you context to the population we serve and how truly important this office is. It should be noted that 20% of Nevadans, or approximately over 600K Nevadans, are immigrants and refugees. From our immigrant population, 40% are from Mexico. The next biggest population is from the Philippines, which is about 15%, followed by El Salvador at 4%, and China at 3%. This is a very sizable amount of the population, and given the substantial number of immigrants in our state, we have seen time and time again that all issues are really immigrant issues. Next slide. Much of ONA's first year was really a pivot towards COVID-19 response. The COVID-19 pandemic disproportionately affected our immigrant and refugee populations in the state. So the pivot to the COVID-19 response was extremely crucial and extremely necessary. I will now turn it over to Ms. Salas Crespo to share with the committee what ONA has done in its first year of inception.
Thank you so much, Director De Assis. Good morning, all. My name is Margarita Salas Crespo for the record. I will now go over some of the activities of ONA in its first year since inception. Because of the pandemic, as mentioned by the director, most of our work pivoted towards COVID response. Due to the hardship brought on by the closures and unemployment, the Office for New Americans helped establish the Esperanza Fund in partnership with the Nevada Community Foundation, or NCF. The Esperanza Fund piloted a direct cash assistance program intended for Nevadans who did not receive any federal or state relief during this pandemic. The NCF serves as the fiscal agent of the fund. The Esperanza Fund board, which is made up of first and second generation Nevada immigrants, made fund allocations to Fortune community-based organizations, or CBOs, across the state of Nevada, and these CBOs distributed the funds to families in Nevada. Well, while also connecting them to services they did qualify for and other resources. To date, the Esperanza Fund has raised over $1 million and helped 3,333 Nevada families. COVID-19 outreach and education became crucial for this office. At the start of the pandemic, ONA launched its website along with ONA's social media accounts. This was followed by the launch of COVID-19 Resource Guide for Immigrant and Refugees, created in partnership with immigrant serving CBOs. Additionally, we released a series of PSAs that relate accurately and culturally competent information to immigrant and refugees who have been disproportionately affected by the pandemic. In total, ONA has released 7 PSAs. 4 of these PSAs were released in collaboration with other partners, and 1 PSA encouraging people to stay home for Nevada in 6 languages ran as a commercial through Las Vegas PBS. With the approval of the COVID-19 vaccine, our focus shifted to support the vaccination efforts of the state. An equitable and fair distribution of the COVID-19 vaccine is a top priority for the Governor's Office for New Americans. Our main focus is to respond to the concerns for immigrant and refugee communities to address access issues and hesitancy. This includes issues on immigration status, cost, and data privacy. To address some of these concerns, our office has hosted a series of listening sessions with the state's vaccination team and various immigrant and refugee stakeholder groups to ensure that their feedback is incorporated in the state's ongoing vaccination efforts. Lastly, ONA partnered with DPBH to implement Section 3 of Governor Sisolak's Emergency Order 11. This provision waives certain licensing requirements for foreign-trained healthcare workers, as long as they are vetted and approved by the Chief Medical Officer. ONA put in place a system taking foreign-trained applicants, getting them through the credentialing process and onto the desk of the Chief Medical Officer for approval, and eventually deploying them into the community. The credentialing has been made available to the state at no cost. This was made possible through a technical assistance grant secured by ONA from our partners at World Education Services, or WES. To date, BBMC has recorded 68 foreign trained applicants. 28 are currently going through the initial process of document submission. 4 are in the credentialing process, 16 are pending Chief Medical Officer approval, and 6 have been fully approved and are being deployed to assist in the state's COVID-19 response. Our second priority has been providing constituent services to the immigrant and refugee community in Nevada. We offer assistance to those having a hard time navigating state agency processes and collaborate directly with state agencies on these issues if they are one-on-one cases or when bigger issues arise that require further assistance and collaboration. Due to the high number of unemployment cases, we have largely focused on helping immigrant and refugees navigate alien status issues related to their immigration status on their unemployment claims. These issues are either because they are recent refugee or asylee arrivals, have recently renewed their employment authorization card, have become naturalized citizens, or have had their status extended through a court decision, as has been the case with temporary protected status population. To date, our office, in partnership with DETR, has assisted over 250 immigrant and refugee families in resolving issues with their unemployment claims. Additionally, we assisted constituents with temporary protected status renew their documents with the DMV. The TPS designation was extended for several of the countries under this program. The designation was set to expire on January 4th, 2021. This included their identification. In collaboration with the DMV, CBOs, or Congressional Delegation, and the Salvadoran Consulate, we implemented a process to ensure that this population renewed their documentation in time and did not face any further hardship for not being able to drive or have a valid form of ID to access other services. Over 500 TPS recipients have been helped through this process from December 9 to 2020 to January 31st of this year. Additionally, we work collaboratively with our federal delegation to help constituents navigate issues with USCIS related to their status or with the Social Security Administration. And we also collaborate with local officials on issues related to services provided by agencies and organizations under their jurisdiction. Being subject matter experts on immigration, we often engage in rapid response efforts. We work with our agencies and other levels of government when there is an immigration policy from the federal level that, 1, affects the immigrant population, or 2, directly impacts their process. On our presentation, you can see 2 ways in which we have responded to policy changes at the federal level. With the suspension of the J-1 visa program for educators in response to a presidential executive order, and a response to a presidential executive order requirement to seek consent from states and localities in the refugee resettlement process. It is important to note that 250 educators are on J-1 visas at any given time in our state. The regulation impacted approximately 100 teaching positions that were to be filled for that upcoming school year. While this regulation is still in place, this is just one example of how this office advocates for the constituency we serve. Our next priority has been immigrant workforce development in our state, which became much more crucial for the recovery of our economy. It is part of our mission to help the immigrant and refugee population scale the economic ladder by utilizing the talents, skills, and education to assist their integration and inclusion. Prior to the pandemic, ONA received a technical grant from World Education Services Global Talent Bridge to assist our efforts in integrating skilled immigrants in Nevada, primarily through helping them translate their foreign education into the U.S. economy. ONA was selected to be part of the 2020 Skilled Immigrant Integration Program, or SIP, cohort. We are working on some SIP goals to help skilled immigrants integrate better in the state and to address the brain waste issue in Nevada. API estimates that Nevada currently has approximately 40% brain waste stemming from highly trained and high-skilled immigrants and refugees being unable to translate those skills and talents into the U.S. job market, whether it is a licensing barrier, a language barrier, or a combination of these factors, and are forced to take on jobs that do not utilize these skills and talents. Our 3 key goals are: 1, leveraging Workforce Innovation and Opportunity Act dollars, or WIOA dollars, to help with training, education, and language learning for immigrants and refugees in the state, and ensuring frontline workforce service providers know the immigrant population they are serving and what services that population is entitled through WIOA. Our second goal is developing career pathway and licensing guides for the immigrant and refugee community in the state, including outreach and education about licensing requirement changes made with the implementation of AB 275, which opened opportunities for immigrant and refugee communities that often move through various immigration statuses. Our last goal of this program is to develop a strategic plan for the Immigrant Workforce Development Group. Through the work with STIP, ONA is spearheading an Immigrant Workforce Development Group, which brings together relevant agencies and organizations to focus on immigrant workforce development in the state. This is the first of its kind to specifically focus on immigrant and refugee workforce. While it's still on its program strategic planning phases, the aim of this group is to create a train-to-hire pipeline to leverage the skills and talents of our immigrant population. The state's refugee resettlement agencies, community colleges, state agencies, workforce boards, and our workforce development providers are part of this group. I will now pass it on to Director Sharina Diazis to close our presentation.
Thank you so much, Ms. Salas Crespo. So in the year and a half that ONA has been established, we have brought immigrant and refugee voices and concerns into the forefront of all levels of government regarding different issues that affect them, like housing and access to healthcare and access to education. And in the next biennium, we will continue to do so. We are intending to remain a resource hub for immigrants and refugees in the state. Additionally, our office is always monitoring the ever-changing immigration landscape and how it affects the population we serve. We will continue to work closely with our federal delegation to put forth the concerns of Nevadan immigrants and refugees as they promulgate laws in the federal level. Lastly, there are two things we really intend to focus on. One is our constituent services and helping immigrant Nevadans navigate state processes and helping and advising state agencies when an immigration regulation affects their processes as well. And second, we will be focusing more on immigrant workforce development. You already heard our efforts on this end, and we will continue these efforts further, especially now that we have created an immigrant workforce development group that really focuses on helping immigrants scale the economic ladder, either through licensing or retraining or upskilling through bridging programs. Next slide. Now that you have all heard what the work the Office for New Americans has done, is currently doing, and our intention for the next 2 years, we do have two enhancement units for a budget account, Enhancement Unit 225 and Enhancement Unit 490. So 225 is requesting to fund one management analyst position that is currently the position that the private grant is funding. Enhancement Unit 490 is the request to eliminate the revenues and expenditures for the private grant that has expired. For context, both enhancement units were submitted before IFC approved the second round of funding for the MA2 position last January 27th of this year, which will fund the position for fiscal year 2020 to 22. While there is a possibility of a third round of this grant that will possibly fund fiscal year 22 to 23, this grant is not yet secured. So this puts ONA in a tough spot because we do want to continue this work, and having a senior advisor immensely helps push our work forward. Without yet securing the third round of grant, we do ask the committee to take that into consideration. And a final slide to conclude our presentation. Our first year was really focused on alleviating some of our burdens and the barriers faced by our immigrant communities that have been exacerbated by the COVID-19 pandemic. This illuminates the fact that there is so much work left to be done to help immigrants within our state. I am very proud to say that the Office for New Americans is an immigrant-led, women-led, and trilingual office offering services in English, Spanish, and Filipino. I personally am looking forward to the next 2 years to really lean into our efforts on the inclusion and integration of our immigrants and refugee Nevadans. I'm optimistic that we can move the office forward towards the direction that it needs to go. Ms. Salas Crespo and I understand, we live and are from these communities, the communities that the Office for New Americans serve. We are a small team, but we are a good team, I think. And again, it is our pleasure to present in front of you this morning, and Ms. Salas Crespo and I are happy to tag team all the questions you have for us today.
Thank you so much. That was great. A lot of work in a brand new thing that we just started. So thank you for all the work you're doing. I was really impressed with the on the licensure piece to be able to help some immigrants that had licensure. That a lot of times we see they come here to this country and they end up driving a taxi when they were a doctor where they came from, and to be able to take advantage of that and help them to be able to fill, especially workforce development that we need here. So. We do have a few questions. We're going to start first with Senator Ratty.
Thank you, Chair. So I just would like to echo the Chair's comments. I'm just so very, very thrilled that you were in place and up and running in time to address the pandemic and to do what you could to support the governor's office to make sure that the response was seeking to achieve some equity and reach out to some communities that we hadn't before. I guess that's my first question. The bigger question is just a little bit of more elaboration. You're a small office and there were a lot of goals on that slide. And so I'm interested in how you're prioritizing the work in the next biennium, where you see your focus is. I think in the immediate term, we're worried about the vaccination and getting it out to communities in a more equitable manner and getting it to the places that we need to get it. But if you could just talk through, there's no way that you can be 100% successful in everything that you put on that slide. So what is your work plan for the next 2 years or for the next biennium?
Chair Diaz, for the record, thank you for that question. Given that our office is quite small, and we really do believe that because of the sizable amount of the immigrant population, every issue really is an immigrant issue. But what we are focused on right now, and Ms. Salas Crespo can further elaborate, is the vaccine rollout. We have seen that there is quite a equity problem that has been addressed currently, but we are really focusing on reaching hard to reach communities that either has vaccine hesitancy or does not know where to ask resources from. But when that happens, when the vaccine rollout is successful, we really do want to pivot to workforce development. This office believes that when you put someone and help someone scale the economic ladder, it really will help not only themselves, but the intergenerational aspect of an immigrant and refugee family. So that's why we really formed the Immigrant Workforce Development Group, because we are not workforce development experts ourselves. So this group really puts everyone at the table to specifically focus on immigrant and refugee issues in workforce development, whether it's putting them through resources. Some immigrants don't know there are resources available for them, especially WIOA funded resources, and or helping them through licensing or upskilling. We really do want to launch our first cohort this year. It would be a small cohort. It's a pilot program. We do understand that, and we do understand that our capability, but we do want to launch it in the South and in the North. And we've really put our refugee resettlement agencies, we're trying to build that cohort on their intake. So because their intake process is really similar, it's already in place. And then we already have the data on what the refugee population looks like.
All right. Is that any more questions, Senator Ratty? Okay, so I believe Assemblywoman Monroe Moreno has some questions.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you so much for the presentation and the work that you are doing. I have a question about slide 4, the graph that you have on slide 4, with the breakdown of Nevada's immigrants. And there's a large section that it's 38% of other. And I know that your office is trilingual, English, Spanish, and Filipino, but what are you doing to work with community leaders in that group of others to make sure we get cultural competency information out to those communities about the work that you are doing?
Margarita Salas Crespo for the record. Sorry, Director Thune, I'll take this one on if you don't mind. So we understand that the largest population of immigrants in Nevada are Hispanic in the AAPI population, which is fantastic because given that I am from the Latino community and Director Diaz is from the AAPI community, we can cover those. But one of the other areas that we have identified is being able to reach our African diaspora, because a lot of those other folks or in the other section are community members from the African diaspora. So we are actively trying to engage to some of those leaders. Some of our outreach has been including to religious leaders in those communities, because we understand a lot of the times they do go towards those members of the community. Obviously, the other way we can reach them, because we have some refugees who come from those countries as well, is through our connections with the refugee resettlement agencies. I would stress that here, that we try to do our best to reach as many folks as possible. but we are a two-person team. And one of the things that we want to do, or at least we know, given that ourselves are from those communities, is trying to see if we can bring in other folks that are representative of those communities as well into this office that can connect directly with folks, because I have a really good connection with the Latino community in the state of Nevada. So it's really easy for me to reach folks and engage them into that work and let them know that through this office, they have a direct connection to state government, as well as Sharina with that population, right? But, you know, anytime we're trying to bring in a intern or, you know, potentially the other position, we want to have those folks represented, even within our office, to ensure that we're connecting with them. But we are actively engaging with those leaders, including through the Esperanza Fund. We had representation from those from that CBO. We ensured that there was representation from all the immigrant communities from the CBOs that received that funding.
Thank you so much for that, because once we set up the Office of New Americans, I've heard from community constituents where they felt left out, they weren't part of it. So I appreciate the outreach that you're doing. It's very important that we make sure we're connecting with all of our immigrants everywhere in the state, and make sure that any literature that goes out to the community is actually going out in the language that they understand and know the resources that are available. So thank you so much for that, and anything that we can do to help you, that's what we're here for.
Thank you. I do have, let's see, I've got Senator Hammond, and then Assemblyman Roberts, and then Assemblywoman Tolles, just so that you know that I've got you on track there. So let's start with Senator Hammond.
Make sure that, can you hear me now? Okay.
Yes, we can.
So thank you, Mr. Cisa, for your presentation this morning. I think there's a couple comments that have been made that, I think that are really important for us to remember. Historically, when we talk about immigrants when they come in the country, I know Senator Dennis mentioned it, sometimes they come in and they don't get the resources necessary for them to be then placed into the economy where they're actually more beneficial, more helpful to everybody. I think too many times as Americans, we forget that the immigrant population is really necessary. I mean, I'm looking at, right now, for the purposes that for this office, I'm part of Gen X. Gen X, we're a small population. And every time somebody from the baby boomers, every time they retire or go away, there's not enough of us to replace them. And now you have an immigrant population that comes in, does a fantastic job, but they could do a lot better if we actually place them in the position where they actually can do the most help. And I think that your program to educate and get them in the proper position, I think that's wonderful. But I wanted to hone in on the Esperanza Fund that you guys talked about a little earlier. I saw that it's been helping over 3,000 families. I saw that you had over $1 million in there. I kind of wanted to know a little bit more about it. Are you still receiving more funds? The original purpose was to help those families during the pandemic to receive funds that they weren't getting from the federal government. How are you going to use that fund in the future? Because you were talking a minute ago with Senator Ratty about some of your plans. Do you have a plan? How are you going to pivot? Are you still receiving funds? Are people still putting money into the Esperanza Fund? And then what are you going to be using it for in the future? What are your thoughts on that, if you've given any thought to that? Thank you for the question, Sharina Diaz, for the record. So what the goal that is really the role for the Office for New Americans for that fund is a connector. Basically, we connected our CBOs, and there's 14 of them, as we've said, really spanning the demographic of the immigrant and refugee population. And then the fund has an Esperanza Fund Board that makes decisions based on the fund, and they're the ones that are actively really also trying to get more funds in. Although right now there are no, I think all the funds have been allocated to our CBOs. What we really intend to do is, number one, for if we do have future funds, is one, we want to potentially use future funds for workforce development. As I've said, this is really crucial in our mission to make immigrants economically sustainable. We know that licensing is a big key to really uplifting yourself in terms of economic sustainability. And sometimes these licenses
are hard. They're expensive. They take hours. And when you're taking care of a family, let's say, or, just have a lot of bills to pay, it's really hard to kind of have that money for licensing. So we do intend that fund to kind of supersede, really, like after this pandemic, kind of be in perpetuity. We also want, that potentially those funds to help our DACA recipients. DACA applications are very expensive. And sometimes, as I said, some DACA eligible recipients can't afford those. And so we really want to hone in on their talents and skills as well, in terms of, giving them that opportunity to have, to apply for DACA. And I think Ms. Margarita Salas Crespo, if you have anything else to add.
Yes, Margarita Salas Crespo for the record. I'd just like to also clarify that the funds are not being received by ONA. The funds are being received and managed by the Nevada Community Foundation. So our role really has been more of bringing folks into the table and helping think through some of these programmatic goals. But ultimately, the goals and where the money is allocated into what programs is not a decision that is up to this office. That decision is made by the Esperanza Fund Board, which has some really great recognizable names. Duncan Lee, who also chairs the Nevada Community Foundation, is the board chair of the Esperanza Fund Board. So I just wanted to make sure I emphasize that. But of course, as we have those conversations and as the board members ask us for advice, this is some of the advice we're telling them based on the needs that we're seeing for the community. As Sharina mentioned around our DACA population, right? It is a lot of them have become head of households, right? So if they are renewing their application, we want to ensure that they have access to the work permit that allows them to work legally and continue to provide for their families, especially as we're going through this pandemic. So those are some of the things some of the information we're given to the board members as they're making these decisions. But again, it is our intent to continue to speak very highly of what the Esperanza Fund Board has accomplished for the community. And for additional information, the Esperanza Fund Board gave a $300 one-time allotment to families. So it's not nearly enough given that we've been in this pandemic for over a year, but at least it let some of those families know that the governor's office, the state of Nevada, was actively advocating for them to receive some form of funding, which we think is incredibly important for them to know.
Thank you. I think that answers my question, and I'd be remiss if I didn't say that I think a lot of times with bureaucratic agencies, sometimes we don't get the passion that we necessarily need to actually provide the services. That's not true here. I can feel the passion that you both have for your community and those who are coming in. So I really appreciate the work you're doing. I'd like to reach out to you later on and see what I can do to help.
All right. Thank you. We're going to go to Assemblyman Roberts.
Hey, Mr. Chair, I appreciate the presentation today. I supported the creation of the office. My wife's half Filipino, and her extended family immigrated here, and a lot of them live in Las Vegas. And the other reason was, at my time at Metro, we had a significant gap in refugees and engagement with refugees. And in fact, at Metro, we created the Office of Community Engagement just to fill that gap. And I'm really happy to see that you guys are engaging in those communities. And could you kind of explain or expound on how you touch base with those folks when they do arrive in our community, and kind of what you're doing to welcome them and acclimate them to jobs and services?
Thank you for the question, Trina Diazis. For the record, so our refugee resettlement in the state of Nevada is handled by 3 refugee resettlement agencies. 2 down here in Southern Nevada, which is Catholic Charities of Southern Nevada, and the African Center, or an ECDC. And then up north will be Northern Nevada International Center, which is under the umbrella of UNR. So they have a refugee division as well. So what they do for refugees to resettle here, they go through the federal process, of course, of vetting. They're the most vetted population coming into our country, right? And they come here, and then the refugee resettlement agencies are actually the ones that help them resettle. They do get, funding from federal government and through ORR and a few other things, and they do help them resettle. What we do as an agency is we listen to what the refugee resettlement agencies' concerns and issues are. For example, a lot right now, and Ms. Salas Crespo can expound because she is the lead for our constituent services, is unemployment. These refugees come in, you know that they don't have a lot of work history here or, work history. So they have troubles navigating that system, and compound it with the language access. It is really tough. So we're really working with the refugee resettlement agencies to help their population navigate through that. Secondly, if there's anything, that issues arising, the refugee resettlement agencies come to us for that, and then we'll help them connect with any resources, whether it's state. Some of our problems that we've encountered before is like the DMV, for example, did not, we had a problem with the licensure because they could not figure out what an I-94 is, which is the documentation of refugees. So, there were several refugees that had a problem with obtaining their license. We connect with the DMV for that, explain to them what, that process is like on the refugees end, and then explain to them that it is a legal document. So we do work with our state agencies as well to address that. Right now, currently as well, we're really trying, as we said, for the workforce development, our pilot program will focus on skilled refugees, these refugees that come here being doctors, engineers in their home countries and can't just translate the skills here. So we're really trying to find a pathway for that cohort to leverage those skills and talents and education that's already been paid for in their own country, and to come here and help them maybe not get the job that they had before in their home country, but at least in that industry that really uses those talents and skills.
Thank you. I appreciate your efforts there, and I appreciate you supporting those agencies, because there definitely was a gap here, and look forward to seeing what you guys do in the future. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. We will go to Assemblywoman Tolles.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you for the presentation, and I especially appreciate the work that you're doing, helping people navigate the often complex licensing boards and process, and getting professionals into those positions that we often, we talk about issues of access to healthcare, and we have trained, skilled individuals who could fill those positions, in particular, or at the university level, teaching and so forth. And just really appreciate the work in that regard. Going back to SB 538, there was a section, and maybe I missed it in your presentation, but I know that the bill laid out that one of the roles of the Office of New Americans was to review and analyze policies and programs to look for, essentially duplication in services, and to make recommendations to the state and to the governor. Did you have a report that you produced in regards to any duplications in services statewide that you found that you could provide to this committee? I'd love to see what work was done in regards to that as prescribed in the bill.
Thank you for the question. I'm Sharina Diaz for the record. I've got to be honest with you, Assemblywoman. Our work really has pivoted to COVID-19 response this year. And given that I was alone in the office for some months, and then Ms. Salas Crespo came in October, it was really, really just tough to juggle certain things. We do want to prioritize that part. With the duplication and the repetition of statutes as well as implementation. We started also trying to implement AB 275, which is the licensure one that struck, the requirement for SSN, and we've been getting constituent inquiries about that. Sometimes we work with the boards as well. Recently, we worked with one board that kind of helped them streamline their process and implement that. But really, it's really a problem of capacity. I would say that this office has not been able to kind of achieve what we want to achieve in that aspect. We're a two-woman team with just a lot of issues that is on our plate, as well as, in the middle of a pandemic. But once, I guess, we pivot to, post-pandemic and what that looks like, we're really looking forward to kind of take that on as well. So unfortunately, there would be no report at this time, but we will prioritize that once we get over the COVID-19 vaccination rollout.
Margaret,
I certainly appreciate that. Oh, please.
Sorry, Assemblywoman Coles. Margarita Rosales for the record. I would also like to say that based on the constituent services that we have been providing, and because those come from different issues, not just one issue, right? Sometimes it's housing, sometimes it's healthcare. What we actually have noted is that there really isn't a lot of duplication, but more so fragmented services that are available, right? Like sometimes, for example, one of the issues that we have noted quite a lot on almost in every single area with every single agency is the lack of consistent language access services, right? One agency may be doing things one way while another agency does something different based on their needs, which is understandable, but then often enough, populations are served to the capacity that they need to be served. So if anything, I would say that while we haven't been tracking, what we have noted, given the different services that we have been providing, or as we address issues that are coming to our office from the constituency that we serve, is that there's more so a fragmented approach on how we are treating and servicing the immigrant population in the state, which is something that we're taking note of so that we can start thinking creatively, or what are some ways that, we can streamline processes for state and the community we serve.
Thank you for that. And it sounds like through this process, you have been gathering that information. It's just a matter of getting it down into one report. And certainly nobody anticipated the challenges we would be facing this past year. So I can certainly appreciate that. Mr. Chair, if I can just follow up with a clarifying question from the presentation, and then I'll be done.
Yes, go ahead.
Thank you. So I understand that we did, and thanks for referencing the January 27th IFC meeting. So we did receive the grant funding for FY 2022 for the $110,000, and we are going to apply again for additional funding for FY 23 because it does relate to the request that we have before us as a body, that at least the first year of that funding has been taken care of by that private grant. Is there any reason to believe that we would not receive that second grant that would cover FY 23? And when do we think we'll get that answer?
Sure, Nadia, for the record, thank you for the question. I would not want to really speculate until the MOU is in front of me and signed. I'm highly optimistic. I'm always highly optimistic that we will get the third grant. We will probably know in the middle of when the second grant has been dispersed and allocated to see. But I really don't want to speculate if we do get that funding or not, because if it's not official, then it's really not official.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. One quick follow-up. It sounds like you've been doing a lot of things. Have you become a resource for all the agencies, the state agencies?
Trinidad, for the record, we're aiming to be that. We do engage with a lot of our agencies and their divisions. But yeah, when immigration regulation happens that gets promulgated in the federal level, we do work with our state agencies if this affects the processes. As you can see, with the TPS delegation being extended, a lot of our agencies reach out to us if there's any problem that arise when it comes to immigration relation problems. But we are also proactively reaching out to them as well, introducing this office, saying, if you want to reach the immigrant population, we are here to help. We are, we always advocate for a refugee and an immigrant population. And so it's maybe a two-way thing, them reaching out to us and us proactively really introducing ourselves, given that we are really a new office on 1.5 years in its inception.
Thank you. Assemblyman Levitt, I believe you have a question.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So if I heard correctly, you said that the Filipino population is the second largest immigrating population into Nevada. And so my grandfather was a Filipino immigrant, immigrated to the United States from the Philippines. I wondered if with the addition of staff that you guys have added on, do you have anyone dedicated to that population? I know there's a huge language barrier in that population. Do you have anyone dedicated to that?
Sharina Diaz for the record. I'm actually Filipino. So I actually am from the Philippines. And I moved here about almost 10 years ago, a decade ago. But we are a small team of two. So Miss Margarita Salas-Crespo and I, we tag team everything. So I am the one that's dedicated to Filipino and broadly the AAPI community, because I'm the one that is from that community. And in terms of the language access problem as well, we do have a report from our partners from the American economy that about in our immigrant population, 2.8% of Filipinos need language access. So yes, we try to translate a lot. It's really and I'm gonna be honest, it's really hard to kind of juggle putting resources in another language when there's our plates are overflowing. We do try to kind of to reach out to engage with community-based organizations as well that serve the Filipino community, but broadly also the AAPI community. But that's, what we will continue with our efforts, because it's, as well, personal as well for me too, because I'm from that community.
Thank you. I appreciate that. And I just reiterate my colleague's sentiment that I'm happy to help with that community in any way I can. I'm being tied to that community.
Thank you. We have Assemblywoman Carlton has a question.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And if I could, I'd like to go back and just clarify something. I got a little confused about the Esperanza Fund, and it sounds like it did some fantastic work. I know there were a lot of challenges when the CARES Act money came out, and we're all a part-time legislature, we're all a citizens legislature. So in my other job, I was doing a lot of work with that, and we saw some of the barriers. So I'm glad you were able to figure out a way to be able to address some of those, to be able to help some folks get the assistance that they needed. But because it's listed within your budget presentation, I just want to make sure that I understand exactly what the relationship is. The legislature is always very careful about agencies being involved in nonprofits and fundraising. I just really want to understand the relationship. You had mentioned a board. So if you could just sort of clarify where the purpose of the Esperanza Fund and how you work with that, and how does it actually fit into your everyday work, that would help me understand a little bit better.
Thank you for the question, Assemblywoman. Sharina Diaz for the record. So the Esperanza Fund is completely its own entity. It has an Esperanza Fund board with first and second generation immigrants. What we really do, and I think I've stated, is that we connect just the CBOs that we work with to the fund, and then the CBOs apply for this fund. When the fund has grant money to disperse. We are also, we advise the Esperanza Fund board in a sense, given that we are very closely working with our immigrant and refugee communities, but that's essentially how the structure is broken down. I hope that answers your question. And
so the community-based organizations that you're talking about reach out to you and then you refer them to the fund? Sometimes
that does happen. Sharina Diaz for the record. Sometimes it does happen when the Esperanza, the initial the first round of Esperanza Fund, we actually did identify this community-based organizations to the funders, to the Esperanza Fund board. And we said, okay, these are the community-based organizations that we believe run the whole gamut of the immigrant and refugee population in our state. And they serve the constituency. They're there on the ground day in and day out, and they know their constituency, and they would benefit from that grant money.
Okay, I just want to make sure that we really understand, because we want to be careful about that. They're totally separate, but yet we saw them in the presentation. So I just wanted to make sure there was a very clear record of what was going on, knowing that you do have a small shop, you don't have a fiscal person in your shop. So we want to give you all the support that you need to make sure that your records are correct and that everyone understands the work that you're doing. So thank you very much.
Thank you. I don't have anybody else on my list. Did I miss anybody? If I did, either raise your hand or unmute and tell me. I think I can see just about everybody. Okay, I'm not hearing anyone else or seeing anyone that has any additional questions. Want to thank you for your presentation. I never imagined that we could get it as much going as we've been able to get in the short period of time that we've had the office open when we were working on this. And so this is amazing. So thank you for all the work that you're doing. And with that, I'll go ahead and close the discussion on this budget. And we are now going to move to the Office of Energy budget presentation. We have 3 budgets accounts from that office. And I invite the Director, David Loebsack, to begin his presentation when he's ready.
Thank you, Mr. Vice Chairman. David Loebsack for the record, Director of the Governor's Office of Energy. If you'll allow me a second, I'm going to bring my slides up.
Yep.
Okay, hopefully we have those up now.
I can see it.
Okay, very good.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. And with me today is Jennifer Taylor, Deputy Director for Intergovernmental Relations. She'll be sharing some of the presentation duties this morning. We also have Program Managers Robin Yoakum and Laura Wickham on hand in case there are specific questions that are in their areas. Okay, so our department overview. Our mission is to ensure the wise development of Nevada's energy resources in harmony with local economic needs and to position Nevada to lead the nation in renewable energy production, energy conservation, exportation of energy, and transportation electrification. Our authority is under NRS 701 and 701A, and you can see broadly what it is we do right there on that slide. So our major programs are sorted here by these various buckets: energy efficiency, renewable energy, transportation electrification, and our general programs, and we'll be going more in depth into those as the slide presentation proceeds. But from a high level, it's important to recognize Governor Sisolak's clean energy vision. Governor Sisolak is committed to regaining Nevada's position as a clean energy leader to combat the indisputable effects of climate change for future generations and for the abundance of green-collar jobs Nevada can create right now. Certainly, this imperative has taken a dramatically different imperative during the pandemic and as we begin our post-pandemic recovery in the state. And in terms of what we've really been busy with over the past 2 years, it really is the climate initiative. As you are aware, in 2019, Nevada took decisive action to address the climate crisis. Nevada joined the U.S. Climate Alliance. We passed SB 254, setting greenhouse gas reduction goals. And then Governor Sisolak signed in November of 2019, Executive Order 2019-22, directing state agencies to develop a climate strategy. And of course, that was released December 1st, and you can find that strategy.
Mr. Loebsack, sorry to interrupt you real quick. Your volume is going in and out. So I don't know if that you can do anything.
Try that again. Is that a little better? It may have just been my earbuds behind the jacket. Is that better?
Yeah, just keep going. I'll tell you.
Okay, I'll keep it close. Thanks. And if you've not had a chance to review that, we would remind you that that plan can be found online at climateaction.nv.gov. So for our performance metrics, you can see here, percent increase in renewable energy generated, percent reduction in per capita energy consumption, percent reduction in energy consumption in state-owned buildings, and percent of EV charging infrastructure along state highways. I would note for the committee that due to the various sources, a lot of this information comes from the Energy Information Administration at the federal level, as well as information that we've had to enter into NEBS. You'll see some of these still listed as projected rather than for actual. And so for the organizational structure of the office, you'll see here are 11 positions, one of which is open right now, arranged here. I'll walk you through kind of the staffing challenges that we've had during the pandemic and the hiring freeze, but we're almost back up to real strength here at this point. After the hiring freeze went into effect, we had 4 vacancies. Our grants and fiscal manager, one of the MA3 positions, our public information officer, our administrative assistant 4, and the energy efficiency specialist. First, we requested an exemption to fill the grants and fiscal manager in August of 2020, and that was approved. The position was filled in October 2020. We requested then an exemption to fill the PIO position in August of 2020, and that position was filled in January of this year. And then the agency requested an exemption for the AA4 position in December of 2020, and that was approved. And our new AA4 actually just started this week on Monday. I will note that the energy efficiency specialist, we currently have some amendments to that position before HR for review to move that to more of a energy policy, climate policy specialist position. So we hope to have some information and some news on that front shortly. I would also note that the organization recently realigned some of the reporting arrangements. Deputy Director Taylor now oversees one of the energy program managers, which is consistent with the intergovernmental relations work and portfolio that those 2 positions worked together on. And so this is a better alignment inside the agency. And so for our funding, a snapshot from fiscal year 2020, you can see our revenue at $4.7 million, comprised primarily of renewable energy tax abatement money. 59%, 11% is the Department of Energy's state energy program. And then we also have various fees at 3%. And then, of course, the big chunk is the Volkswagen settlement at 27%. We'll talk more about that.
Director Bobsey, and I apologize for the interruption. This is Broadcasting Production Services. You're still cutting a little in and out with your microphone. So if you could just hold that closer to your mouth there. I think your microphone is just really good at cutting out background noise, and you may need to speak more directly into it.
Okay, I'll keep it right here. And so turning specifically to BA 4868 administration. Oh, I do want to note this. Let's go back real quick. Certainly there's a gap between the revenue of 4.7 million and the expenditures of 3.5. And I do want to note that gap was really due to multiple staff vacancies as well as the hold on expenditures during the pandemic. And so for BA 4868 administration, you'll see revenue of 1.2 million, expenditures of 1.1 million. The funding for this account is comprised of the Renewable Energy Fund, application fees, and again, the Department of Energy State Energy Program, the grant funds. So highlights in BA 4868, we had an office move. We moved last year. The previous office was too large, and we've right-sized into a new location and are saving money as a result. You can see that our prior year's lease was $65,629 per year. And the new lease is significantly less than that. So we have an initial office savings of just over $13,000. I would also note that we have a Las Vegas office, and our annual lease obligation there is just over $4,000. So in terms of the office configuration, realized savings is just shy of $9,000 in FY21. So our enhancements, E710 computer hardware replacement. That's just per the EATS replacement schedule. Similarly, E711 equipment replacement. There again, the EATS replacement schedule. And then the one that I wanted to call specific attention to is E901. This is elimination of GBTA fees. I want to note that you'll be hopefully hearing the budget bill for this, where we can have a broader discussion. This slide notes the NEBS BDR number, but I would call to the attention of the committee that the BDR is BDR 1070, so that you can keep an eye on that. And it is for sunsetting provisions of NRS 701A, otherwise known as the Green Building Tax Abatement Program, GBTA. We'll certainly go more into the rationale for this decision for inclusion in the governor's recommended budget, but the high level is with the evolution of building codes, energy efficient building codes, we believe that there's the time for incentivizing energy efficiency through this program has passed. And so this enhancement is noting that with sunsetting of the program, there's certainly a pool of fees that come into our office at the time of application that will be going away. And so those application fees do cover some staff time for processing projects. We'll be removing that revenue from the office if it sunsets. And I would note that, as many of you are aware, this program actually goes back to 2005. But since 2015, we have actually been collecting fees to cover the work. And so there's been a total of just over $300,000 in revenue since 2015. And we've expended $205,000 of that since 2015. So while we will no longer be accepting new participants to the program, it is important to note that there will continue to be abatements that will have to be monitored by our office. Turning now to BA 4869, the Renewable Energy Fund. Revenue here, $4 million, expenditures, $2.3 million. We'll go in successive slides into more detail about what this fund is. But of course, there's a lot more revenue coming in than expenditures, because this is based on the selection of abatements that were granted during a distinct time period that pay into the Renewable Energy Fund. Participants in the Renewable Energy Tax Abatement Program that came in after that window do not pay into this fund. And of course, at a certain point in the future, this fund will be expended and the office will lose that major area of support.
Mr. Bobstein?
Yes.
Let me ask real quick, because you've got these in the budget. We're going to ask questions in the order of the budgets, and that's the second one. Do you want us to go back? We could probably ask our questions on since you've already covered 4868.
Yes, happy to do that if you'd like to stick on that and just do budget account by budget account.
Yeah, let's do that, because I know we have some questions on 4868. I believe Miss Assemblywoman Monroe Moreno.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I do have a question on that budget and on the presentation as a whole. Thank you so much for the presentation. As you, for E250, the elimination of the green building tax abatement, does your agency anticipate that there'll be any operational cost savings as a result from the sunset of this tax abatement program?
Thank you for the question, Assemblywoman. Through Vice Chair Dennis, to you, David Bobstein, for the record. We will potentially open up some staff time and resources to possibly devote to other projects and priorities as a result of this. We will lose, as noted, a significant amount of revenue, but there will be a corresponding resource freeing that we'll realize as a result of that. But again, it is important to note that there are still abatements that will have to be monitored during the course of their life, even though we will no longer accept new participants in the program.
Thank you for that. And if we could just go back to your organizational structure on, I believe it was slide 7 of your presentation, when you listed out, you've filled a number of positions, gotten a waiver to fill a number of positions. But I asked before, and I'm going to ask again, the energy efficiency specialist, that vacant position, and I believe you mentioned another position today, a climate policy position. Will those two positions be housed in Southern Nevada?
Thank you for the question, David Bobstein, for the record. Assemblywoman, that is yet to be determined. It's one position that we're talking about, but to give you a preview and to kind of give you a window into the thinking that we're going to have to go through before we just make any determinations on a switching of station to duty on that position. If anything, moving from an energy efficiency specialist position to more of a climate policy, renewable energy policy type position, a major area of need for us right now, and there's a little bit of irony to this, but we will detail this later in the presentation, is our work related to renewable energy siting, specifically solar energy siting, that has a lot of importance to Southern Nevada. But the challenge for us that we have to figure out is that there's a tremendous amount of communication and interaction with the state BLM office, which is actually located in Reno. So I'm going to have to kind of balance as we go forward with the search where that person will be best situated.
So if I remember correctly, and correct me if I'm wrong, during your pre-session presentation, you did indicate that the position would be located in Southern Nevada. And as we have made it through this pandemic, we have learned that we can work anywhere in the state remotely. So can you tell me why the decision, or perhaps the decision to change where this position will be located? Because there is not, for your office, a footprint in Southern Nevada, and that's problematic for me.
So Chairman Roman Reno, let me see if I can clear up the confusion on this one. The promise that we made, you're actually scooping our presentation, because we do have the announcement to make that we have made a hire for the executive director of the Nevada Clean Energy Fund, and that position will be in Las Vegas as I committed.
Thank you.
All right, thank you. I am going to, I see Chair Brooks is here, and going to turn it back over to him. Want to make sure that he gets, for the record, that for the attendance that he's back. And I don't know if and also Senator Canizaro, want to make sure that they both got, for the attendance purposes, are marked. Thank you. Senator, or Chairman Brooks.
Thank you, Vice Chair Dennis, and thank you for starting the meeting off and running it to this point. I'm sorry it took so long to get on. There was just so much support for my bill I presented that it took longer than I thought. I wanted to follow up on Assemblywoman Moreno's question about that, and then your reply. You know, while the state office for the BLM is in Carson City, the majority of the volume of work and the problem is in the Las Vegas field office. And the coordination largely takes place at the field office level. And so I think that while I totally recognize that the state office is adjacent to where you're located up in Carson City, there's a lot of rationale for locating that position in Southern Nevada as well. And I, like Assemblywoman Moreno, think that, you know, where possible, in some places it's not possible, but where possible, we need to start having a bigger footprint for the state of Nevada and Southern Nevada. And so I believe, are there any other questions on this budget 4868?
I do have one, Chair. And it's kind of a general one, and sorry, may I ask?
Please go ahead. Please go ahead.
I've asked it kind of in previous hearings, but it's always been an enigma to me how we have an established state climatologist in statute and have for a long time, literally someone who was, you know, driving out to the middle of Nevada all around, placing out water basins, doing water collection, kind of all of that kind of stuff. And we've got this one person that I believe is up in the university that seems to be just so disconnected from everything else that we do. And I think there could be conversations about why or anything like that, but it just always seems to me that we've that position could make such better use, perhaps placed somewhere else or even in this office, or if there's been more of a connection with that office so that we're getting more Nevada specific data coming out of our universities to help support the work that you're doing, because we have it there. It just always kind of seems to be a piece of the conversation that is not as enriched as other things we have going on.
Yeah, thank you, Assemblywoman, for the question. David Bobstein, for the record, through Chair Brooks, to you. I would note that in the governor's executive order on climate, NSHE and the need to coordinate across the administration was definitely a major part of the work plan that was given to us. And so through the hiring of our state climate coordinator, which is essentially a joint position working with the Governor's Office of Energy as well as the Department of Conservation and Natural Resources, we were able to activate resources based at UNLV. The climate coordinator is based in Las Vegas, and through the effort that Dr. Averett spearheaded, we were able to really bring in the science and research capacity of NSHE and the different institutions, as well as the state climatologist.
I appreciate that, because I think that's what it's going to take, because then we've got both of our universities working on this. It's long been the desire of the legislature to see that happening. And so it kind of feels like you're going to get it all put together with a nice big bow on it. So thank you.
Thank you, Assemblywoman Benitez Thompson. I have a question from Senator Hammond as well.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Welcome back. It's a really quick question, actually, and it's going to show everybody that I am new to the Finance Committee and also I can't help myself. Sometimes I get curious about things when I see it. I'm looking at your budget, the revenues in the general fund for 2020, 2021, and then again in 2022 and 2023, there's a recommendation of $100. That's got to be some sort of finance thing that I just don't understand, and I probably should ask. I bet you other people have the same question or thought the same thing. They just didn't want to ask it right away. Can you explain that? Can anybody explain that to me?
Happy to do it, Senator. David Bobstein, for the record, through Chair Brooks, to you. We are not a general fund supported agency other than the $100 we get, so that if needed, we can access the contingency fund.
And that's exactly, I thought there was a reason for that rationale, $100 every time. Okay, that makes sense. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Senator. And I believe that we can move on to our next budget now.
Okay, thank you. Give me a second here and I'll pull these up. Okay, so BA 4869. This is the Renewable Energy Fund. As I was beginning to explain, you'll see that the revenue far exceeds the expenditures, and I'll go into the details about why that is on the following slides. But it's important to note the sources of the revenue here. It's the Volkswagen settlement as well as the Renewable Energy Tax Abatement. So renewable energy tax abatement, RETA, established in 2009, modified in 2013 to eliminate GOE's percentage of property taxes. So there's your window. Abatements that were granted during this period pay into the fund. Abatements granted after 2013 do not. This funding source will continue until the current project abatements, there are 13 of them, expire. Of course, this is approximately 59% of GOE's revenue. So we've got declining revenue here. There's a 4% projected annual decrease in property tax revenue, as well as the assessments themselves are viewed as declining. So the specific abatements you can see here, as well as their end dates. So this gives you a sense of the fact that we have a rolling impact on the ultimate cessation of the funding from the renewable energy account. And this next spreadsheet, I apologize, on screen, it's rather busy. This is a spreadsheet that we prepared for Senator Brooks last summer, detailing the different abatements that are in the pool, as well as their location, their geographic location. And so the important thing to see here is the the rows at the bottom that show the percentage of funds by region. So what you can see here is that currently it's 33% from Clark County and 67% from outside of the county. You will note that the online transmission project actually has 2 rows on this chart, so it's 14 rows, and that's just because it, of course, spans multiple counties in the state. I do want to flag one issue of concern for us that we're watching, and that is the Crescent Dunes project. You've certainly seen this in the headlines recently. The update here is that in early 2020, the plant lost its customer, MV Energy. The U.S. Department of Energy took control of the plant. They had taken control of the plant a few months earlier, and so the viability of the plant is in question. What that means for us is we have concern as to whether or not they're going to be paying their taxes and paying into the fund. If they do not, that's a big challenge for us because, of course, 30% of the revenue that goes into the Renewable Energy Fund comes from this particular project. If they were to stop paying we would see a steep decrease in revenue as early as fiscal year 2022. However, we've been monitoring this, and what we know is that they did pay their taxes despite being dark in fiscal year 20. So we're hopeful that this will not be an impact to us, but we have to be prudent and keep an eye on it. On this next slide, you can see 2 columns. This is a projection of the decline in revenue to the Renewable Energy Fund, again, because of those retiring abatements no longer paying into the fund, as well as a column that is projected revenue without Crescent Dunes. And so if you look, where I start to get nervous is in FY 2031. That's where the money really starts to decline, and that sort of danger point comes almost 3 years earlier without Crescent Dunes in the picture. But after the gloom and doom, I do want to talk about some of the good work that the office is doing in this area. We're very grateful to Senator Brooks for the fee authority that he made sure we had in SB 298, 2019. I will tell you that the increase of those fees we adopted last October through temporary regulation. They're effective January 1 for all new abatements. So while the money hasn't come in, we do look forward to having that partial support for a lot of our work in this area. This really includes federal engagement, industry and conservation, non-governmental organization engagement on issues related to permitting, siting, as well as regional engagement. We were supportive and provided testimony on Capitol Hill for the Public Lands Renewable Energy Development Act, portions of which ultimately made it into the Energy Development Act the Energy Act of 2020. That big one being a 25 gigawatt target by 2025 of renewable energy development on federally managed public lands. And so that is a fantastic opportunity for Nevada, of course. But there are also some challenges. If you think of the 30% conservation imperative by 2030, we have some interesting times ahead of us, and the Office of Energy looks forward to engaging and forwarding Nevada's policy position in this space. I would also note that we are working with the solar industry to talk about the various challenges that they have, as Chair Brooks mentioned, with both the Southern Nevada District Office as well as the state office. And we're communicating those concerns, but also the opportunities following the Energy Act to those offices, as well as other levels of Interior and in the new administration. Also been working a lot with various NGOs as they're trying to find balanced solutions for Smart for the Start siting and how we can reconcile all of these challenges for the opportunities that renewable energy development provides us in the state. Would also note we had a successful engagement before the California Public Utilities Commission, whereby that commission identified an additional 1,400 megawatts of solar resources in Southern Nevada that were then communicated to the California Independent System Operator so that they can put that into their transmission planning so that we can see, as a result of these actions and our successful engagement with other partners, development of transmission and additional resources in Southern Nevada. So that's really a part of the work that I know that Senator Brooks was keen on supporting last session when he looked to expand our fee authority in this space. And so with that, I would like to turn it over for the remainder of the presentation with the other programs to Deputy Director for Intergovernmental Relations, Jennifer Taylor.
Thank you, Director Bobzian. Good morning, Chairman Brooks and Chairwoman Carlton. For the record, my name is Jennifer Taylor, Deputy Director for Intergovernmental Relations. And if you will allow me one moment to get my slides on screen, I will be covering the programs and projects in accounts 4869 and 4875.
Ms. Taylor, if you could do 4869, pause, we have some questions, and then jump back into 4875.
Absolutely. Thank you, Chairman Brooks.
And just so you know, we're kind of running low on time here, so we need to be as efficient as we possibly can so that we make sure that the members can get some of their questions on the record. And so we might not need to go through slide by slide, maybe just kind of briefly hit the slides as you go through.
Okay.
Appreciate it.
Thank you, Chairman Brooks. Sorry, hold on one second. Can you guys, can the committee see my, oh, hold on. There's a tiny problem with the slide share. Okay. Okay.
Your slide, broadcast services, is it, can the public see it?
Chair Brooks, this is Broadcast and Production Services. We are seeing the slides in the Zoom call. Please stand by 1 second to confirm the public and that broadcast can see it as well. All right, thank you, Chair. We can see the slides. Please proceed.
Thank you. Please proceed, Ms. Taylor.
Thank you, Chairman Brooks. As I mentioned, I will be covering the remainder of account 4869, which supports programs and projects created to offset the cost of electricity to or the use of electricity by retail customers of the utility subject to the portfolio standard. And those include the programs that you see listed here. I will be covering this one Category 9 program under 4869, that is the DEAL program. It is no longer active. It's temporarily on hold while staff examine how it can be improved to better serve state employees. It was a pilot program that provided Nevada employees an interest-free loan for energy efficiency upgrades. You can see the statistics on it during its lifetime. In terms of the number of employees served and the amount of energy saved. I will next cover Category 11 of 4869, which are the energy programs that we'll reference, including performance contracting, lower income solar energy program, and the grant solar battery. Performance contracting program is flows out of NRS 332 and 333A, which allow government agencies to utilize performance contracting to finance energy-related building improvements and projects that pay for themselves through future energy savings. Our PCAP program helps those government agencies by reimbursing the cost of the financial grade audit required by NRS as a prerequisite to undertaking a performance contracting project. Since its inception, it has awarded $1.7 million to accelerate performance contracting, resulting in projects totaling $100 million while creating an estimated 730 jobs and saving more than 51 million kilowatt hours of energy and 463,000 therms annually. The LICEP program is a joint effort of NV Energy and the Governor's Office of Energy. It offers incentives through the annual plan by NV Energy to the Public Utility Commission for approval. for incentives to low-income business customers for solar systems that serve those lower-income populations. It was originally a 2013 pilot program under Assembly Bill 428 and made permanent by Senate Bill 145 in 2017. It has a budget annually of $1.2 million per program year. That's $1 million from NV Energy and $200,000 from DOE. Next. The next project, the next program that we have up is our Grant Sawyer Battery Pilot Project. In late 2017, GOE was considering a pilot project for a commercial scale battery energy storage system known as a BESS, intending to understand how those systems work, analyze if those systems could save the state money, and through strategies like reducing time of use demand charges and demand reduction, provide those savings. Additionally, the point of the project was to look to advise on future battery storage projects and policies. The pilot was undertaken in 3 phases. The first was a study that was granted to Veridity in 2017 to take a look at the full portfolio of state agency offices and determine which buildings might be appropriate candidates for the installation of the BESS. The second phase was the construction of the BESS. After analyzing the work done in the first phase, it was determined that the Grant Sawyer building would be the best candidate for the installation of this system and for the pilot project. That construction ran from October 2018 to July 2019. And now we are in phase 3, which is operations. We selected an entity known as Jelly out of San Francisco to operate the battery on behalf of the state with the goal of maximizing energy savings through dispatching the BESS's stored energy during peak hours and charging the BESS during off-peak hours. We just had the needed revenue grade meters installed at Grant Sawyer for Jelly to run the system, and they are now able to start those operations. The next category, 4869, is category 16, which includes the Nevada Electric Highway. You should have all received the report from Director Bobzian that GOE just released on the Nevada Electric Highway. It details our partnerships and electricity providers and host sites across the state to electrify Nevada's major corridors. The report provided an overview of the program, its funding, its climate policy context, related regional and federal matters, and details for each project site. Briefly, the NEH began as a partnership between GOE, NV Energy, and Valley Electric to put strategic and cost-effective charging stations along US 95 between Reno and Las Vegas. In 2018, it was expanded to include I-80, I-15, US 93, US 50, and additional locations along 95. The goal is to substantially complete this by June of 2021. We have 30 sites identified. 21 of those installations are complete, 7 are under construction, and 2 are pending. Funding comes from NV Energy incentives, the VW settlement funds, and a state match. Starting in July 2020, since this is for additional incentives, we partnered with NV Energy to offer 2 new incentive categories for level 2 electric vehicle charging infrastructure. Qualifying entities in the governmental or lower income categories can receive 100% of infrastructure costs for level 2 chargers, with NV Energy providing 75% of the funds and GOE providing 25% of the funds. So the cap on those incentives are $40,000 with a maximum of 4 ports. UNLV was our first applicant, and we continue our outreach to promote the program and continue the partnership with NV Energy. So that covers 4869, Chairman Brooks, and we can stand for questions on that budget account at this point.
Great, thank you. I think Assemblywoman Gorlow has a question on this budget account.
Thank you, Chair Brooks, and thank you, Ms. Taylor, for being here. Really excited to hear about this electric highway project and that you've been able to expand on several of the other highways, not just 95. I saw the graph that there's 30 of them that are planned and 21 have been completed, 7 in progress. I can't see the graphic very well, so it does look like there might be some bigger blue dots, but that just could be my glasses. So could you expand a little bit and tell where are the 21 completed sites and which 7 are in progress?
Okay, thank you, Chairwoman. Assemblywoman Gorlow. through Chair Brooks to you, if you will allow me 1 minute to pull up a spreadsheet that I can provide that information to you.
Thank you, Ms. Taylor. And please go direct to the members. You don't have to go through me. And I will say that at this point now, I think I've driven on about 2,000 miles of the highway, and probably have used at least 15 of, maybe about 15 of the charging stations throughout the state.
Thank you, Chairman Brooks, and thank you for traveling along the electric highway. We have a couple that, let's see. In progress are sites in Baker and Eureka that are in Mount Wheeler Power's territory. We also have a site at the I-15 US 93 junction, Silver Springs, and at Rye Patch State Park that are in NV Energy's service territory that are under construction. And then finally, we have 2 in Wells Rural Electric Company's service territory in Carlin and in Wells. The ones that are still being assessed are one that would be located near the I-80 and US 95 junction around the area of the NDOT Trinity Rest Stop, and then one at Middlegate. Did that cover your question, Assemblywoman? Did you want the list of all the ones that have been completed?
Maybe let's just do that offline. I know we're a little pressed for time, so we'll get that offline.
Absolutely happy to provide you that list. Thank you so much for the question.
Thank you. And I did have one other question. I know COVID has really impacted a lot of programs and departments. So could you kind of elaborate a little bit more how the pandemic has affected the Energy's office efforts to continue the lower income solar energy program, home energy retrofit, opportunity for seniors, direct energy assistance loan program, electric highway, et cetera?
Thank you, Assemblywoman Gorlo, for the question. Let me take those in order. So LICEP is, the LICEP program works where, again, with annual plans that are approved by our Public Utility Commission, there is a period of time. They run from July 1 to June 30th of every cycle. When the program opens up, applicants are allowed to reserve funds to complete projects. Those funds, the allocated funds for the LICEP program are usually reserved right away. The projects, though, have the ability to seek an extension of time from the initial 12-month period that construction must be complete. They can seek an extension of that reservation of funds through the company, NV Energy, who then makes the determination if the extension can be granted. What we have seen, not so much necessarily for last year with our look back during this presentation, but as we roll forward into the period that will be ending in June, on June 30th for this fiscal year, the projects that were reserved for LICEP have been impacted by COVID from the perspective of being able to complete construction. We have been advised by the utility and its contractor that the majority of those projects under now LICEP 6 will be or have already be seeking extensions related to COVID impacts from being able to do the construction. It's a vibrant program. People are very interested in it. We know that the funds will be expended, and we're excited to be able to get past COVID and continue to provide these opportunities for our lower income Nevadans. For the highway, really, COVID has not really impacted the construction along the highway. There have been other issues, but the projects that are still pending were not, to my knowledge, COVID-related delays. For DEAL, the projects, as I described, that program has been put on hold. Therefore, no more applications had been received, I think, past right around the beginning of 2020's calendar year, maybe spring of 2020. And so, apologies. And so that really, in terms of moving forward with ongoing projects and ongoing applications, that has not really been an issue. When we look to stand that program back up, there may be some evaluation about how do we address future concerns about social distancing, about contractors being in homes, but that is part of the assessment that we would take moving forward for that program. Additionally, as we get past this and folks are able to start working again and we have some resiliency efforts, we know that there is a big gap in the energy efficiency workforce. One of the concerns in the DEAL program was being able to find the requisite types of contractors to do the work. And we were not always able to secure contracts with those folks, causing a backlog in the applications. And so that's another opportunity that we think could be something that we can look at to, again, reinvigorate the program to best serve the state of Nevada as we move past COVID. And then finally, for HEROES, HEROES was delayed because of COVID, because it really prevented the ability to go into folks' homes was problematic during the height of the pandemic, and it prevented contractors from going to homes for a few months. But in the summer, it has picked back up. And again, this is a program that is really impactful to those lower income seniors that have some of the highest energy burdens. And so we're looking forward to being able to really have an invigorated program during this spring and into the summer and fall.
Thank you very much for that elaboration.
Thank you. I appreciate that. I believe we have a question from Senator Hammond.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yeah, one quick question. First of all, good to see you, Ms. Taylor. You're one of my favorite constituents, so it's always good to hear your presentations and know what you're up to. One observation, one quick question about the electric highway. I think Eddie Grant would have been happier if we called it Electric Avenue. That's my observation. Number two, is there any deals in the works or any conversations about private enterprise coming in and also collaborating with this? I mean, we hear about NV Energy and we keep hearing about the state putting money into this. Is there anybody out there talking about putting electric stations other places, maybe even along next to service stations that exist right now? Just kind of going forward to see if that actually would expedite or accelerate the number of charging stations along the way.
Thank you, Senator Hammond, for that question, and thank you for serving me and all your constituents in Senate District 18. There is a great interest, I think, in the market for the installation of charging infrastructure, but I can't speak specifically to what the market is doing, with one exception. Electrify America is a private entity that that grew out of the VW settlement as well. They have been very active in looking for sites that can be very heavily used in heavy urban areas, shopping centers, along highways. And they've done a couple of phases of work. One was first a highway corridor charging phase for their rollout. And what they did was they actually built in some of the locations that GOE had initially assessed for the electric highway. And we were able to leverage their site locations for nominating some of our highway corridors under a program that is described in the report that you received, called the Alternative Fuel Corridor Program under the Federal Highway Administration. They have also now rolled out a phase 2 that was intended to build up urban corridor charging, urban center charging, and they had intended to do 3 to 6 charging stations in Las Vegas at strategic locations, such as, a big anchored shopping center with a Target or a Walmart. And that is one really good example I can share of not just a private entity doing it, but a private entity that grew out of a public good and a public trust under the VW settlement. But there are private entities that are looking into this, and I can find additional information on what might be some of the efforts of some of our larger corporations doing the work. There are also charging stations at some of the resorts that they have put in themselves. If you go to Aria, there are charging stations in the Aria parking lot. And I know that that's something that some of the tourist corridor folks have been looking at.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Mr. Chair, if I might kind of round out that answer a little bit.
Sure.
Thank you, Chair Brooks. David Loebsack, for the record, to Senator Hammond, agree with everything that Deputy Director Taylor said. I think it's important to note here, this really kind of highlights the importance of the Nevada Electric Highway as filling a gap need for a period of time, a very specific niche, and that is being able to reduce range anxiety for EV drivers that wish to travel the long distances of Nevada's major highway routes, which, when you think of it, was maybe not the first business opportunity that a private venture would look at. So we're many years into the Nevada Electric Highway at this point. We've definitely made a lot of progress, and I'm confident that because of this program's contribution, serving as one piece of the overall puzzle for this transition to electrified transportation. In many ways, it sets the stage, particularly our partnership with NV Energy, providing experience and sort of a ramp up to potential future engagement on the part of the utility for building out even more charging infrastructure. But then also, I believe there will be room and lots of activity in the near future of private activity in building out infrastructure as well. So we had a very distinct role to fill, to serve with the Nevada Electric Highway. And we're confident that in the years to come, once the transition really gets rampant, we'll see lots of different models for investment and build out of infrastructure.
And I really appreciate the answer. And I think the reason why I asked that, I posed the question, first of all, the electric avenue, is because you keep hearing more and more manufacturers talk about their commitment to transitioning completely to electric vehicles in general. And so I think by 2035, we're going to see so many more electric vehicles on the road.
Great question, Senator Hammond. And I believe that you're going to see this really awesome Senate bill come out that addresses this very issue very soon. I believe I have a question from Senator Kiefer as well.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I appreciate it. My question was for Director Loebsack. You painted the revenue side of this equation as doom and gloom and what worrying you, but I mean, this is functioning exactly how we created it in 2013, right? This isn't a surprise that this is a declining revenue source, right?
Senator Kiefer, for David Loebsack, for the record, no, it is not a surprise, and certainly this committee is well aware of it. I think it's come forward every budget presentation we've had. It's just flagging that over the next hill, it's yet another issue to be addressed. And so I apologize we don't come forward this time with a solution, but we certainly look forward to working with the legislature on trying to figure out where the State Energy Office goes in the future with sustainability. I will note, and certainly this is a big question that's hanging out there, the possibility in our very active engagement with our delegation, with the Department of Energy on the potential upscaling of federal support in this area. Certainly there are discussions about expansion of the state energy program. And if we see some of that, and I think this goes back to Assemblywoman Monroe-Moreno's question and points earlier, I have already identified for DOE that the one area I would want to see a significant ramp up in terms of personnel would actually be related to renewable energy siting. And so, I'm going to be optimistic that at some point we may be able to see a substantial building up of resources in the office. And certainly that would provide more than enough opportunity for location of staff in Southern Nevada.
I appreciate that. I just wanted to make sure that I wasn't, that how we designed this was not functioning as we had intended in 2013 or something like that. But it sounds like
nope, never the allegation.
Thank you.
And I will note, Senator Kiefer, that the office has the ability to use fees for services, and the siting of helping with permitting and siting for the private industry is going to be a hugely important thing coming up in the next 10 to 15 years, especially if we get more transmission in the state. And so I think that it could be definitely. Thank you for flagging it, Director Loebsack, but there's definitely going to be, I think, a new business model for how the office can function moving forward. I believe that brings us to our last budget, and no pressure. This is the last budget between you and the director of the Legislative Council Bureau and the legislature. So, let's move along efficiently, but make sure that we get all the points out and all the questions answered.
Thank you, Chairman Brooks. Again, just give me one moment to get my screen set up, please. Right. And just checking with broadcast that you can see my screen and my slides.
Broadcast and production services here. It looks like we can see the slides.
Okay, thank you so much. So the next account is, again, 4875, category 11, and that is our renewable, renewable energy loan program. This budget account is made up of American Recovery and Reinvestment Act funds that were utilized to administer GOE's revolving loan program. As you can see from the slide, 23 loans from the inception of the project to today. 11 were repaid in full. 4 are in current repayment status. 8 loans went into default. That they were approved, though, in the fall by the Board of Examiners to be written off. GOE did attempt to collect every one of these debts, including obtaining summary judgments and having those recorded. However, our Attorney General and that office's due diligence determined that these were uncollectible debts. There was one other potential collectible debt that had a judgment recorded and was up for renewal upon further investigation against involving this debt against Sunburst Energy. Our DAG made the determination that there were no funds to pursue and it would be not a productive use of staff time or state funds. Our grant program that was created last session under SB 536 and with US DOE approval, however, has utilized these funds to repurpose them as a grant program to address Nevada goals and initiatives in the categories that you see here on the slide. We have released our first notice of funding. As we discussed on the prior slide, SB 536 in 2019 allowed us to be able to stand this program up. These repurposed funds will be available to all market sectors, residential, commercial, industrial, or public, and will be subject to prior R requirements such as NEPA, Buy American, Davis-Bacon. Our first opportunity for funding was a targeted program, and it focuses on assisting Nevada's tribal nations in identifying solutions for energy resilience, increasing their clean energy access, and offering opportunities for economic diversification on tribal lands. That NOFA was released and it closes in early April, and you can find more information about it on our website. And with that, let me see. One other category, category 12, is our Clean Energy Fund, which was created in 2017. This account in category 12 covers operating reimbursements for the fund. Again, the bill was SB 407 in 2017. GOE received approval to use these RF funds for startup costs for the Clean Energy Fund during its 2019 budget closings. Quickly, as an overview of NCEF, it is intended to improve the standard of living of Nevadans by promoting more efficient, lower-cost clean energy projects that create high-paying long-term jobs, developing ways to streamline financing and make it more efficient for folks applying. Once COVID hit, however, NCEF progress was paused as directed by GFO. Work that we had been doing did not progress again until GOE received approval to move forward at the end of June 2020. That timeframe permitted GOE to seek approval during the August 20 IFC to allocate funds for the hiring of NCEF's first executive director. Following that, NCEF moved forward for continued operational startups, including determining the process for hiring a CEO and / executive director. And as Director Bobzian noted earlier in our presentation, pleased to announce that we did make that NCEF did make an offer to a candidate to be the inaugural executive director, and they will be starting on April 12th of this year. And with that, I will pass it back to Director Bobzian, and again stand for any questions on account 4875.
Thank you, Deputy Director Taylor. And Chairman Brooks, we would stand for questions. Thank you for the opportunity to present the governor's recommended budget.
Thank you, Director. I've got a couple of questions here. I'll start with Assemblywoman Titus.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I appreciate the opportunity to ask a question, and thank you for the presentation. I have a question regarding the loans that were presented and the vetting process on that. Apparently it was $18.8 million in loans, of which we know that 13 million of that they have been defaulted on, and approximately 4 million perhaps will be seeing some return on investment. And there was a comment that the Attorney General felt that these companies didn't have any funds, so they weren't going after them, et cetera. I'm just wondering are there no consequences to these bad debts? Do these folks then can move to another state or area and also do the same process? I'm just wondering, is it posted somewhere that there's a bad debt? Is it posted that these companies went under? I'm just wondering about consequences. That's a lot of taxpayers' dollars there. Can you give me some more information, please?
Sure. Thank you for the question. Deputy Director Taylor, do you want to go ahead and take the first crack, and I can back you up on that?
Sure. Thank you, Director Bobzian. Thank you for the question, Assemblywoman Titus. Yes, there was a process in place for collecting the loans. When and this all precedes our administration. These go back quite a few years, back to the original ARA funds that were issued during the last recovery and recession, and these started under the Gibbons administration. So these loans were intended originally to stand up projects to help develop workforce opportunities and employment opportunities during the recession of 2008, 2009. When you look at loans, or when you look at debt and you get a judgment against somebody, this happens in litigation not infrequently, Assemblywoman, where you go through the court system, you end up with a judgment that is as good as the paper that it is written on. That is not atypical in litigation. So we were lucky enough to be able to secure summary judgments and to have those recorded should assets or a functioning entity be brought forward to try to collect on. Our DAGs did do extensive work trying to find the entity, find assets, and when, just again with lots of other litigation, when that cannot be done, you have to make the decision about renewing judgments and continuing to expend funds or moving on and having them written off. As far as these companies, some of the principals might go and do work in other states or try to do work in other businesses. But again, this process of securing judgments and trying to collect on them is one of the best systems of accountability in dealing with debts. Now, we took into account all of those sorts of issues when looking at the grant program, and we have tried to set up a system that is much more thorough, much more detailed in terms of who we will work with on the grants as folks come in to bring forward projects. And I think, Director Bobzian, I'll kick it over to you for additional details on some of the work that you were doing in the summer on these issues.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Deputy Director Taylor. And I'm glad that you pointed out, I think what is most important to the committee is we heard in our budget presentation 2 years ago loud and clear, and we agreed that lessons learned from this sad chapter needed to be applied to the remaining funds going forward with the grant program. And so we are excited to talk about the fact that we do have this first notice of funding opportunity out. We have a plan for a series of targeted releases, and all of that is with the lessons learned in mind so that we can avoid that in the future. And I guess overall, Assemblywoman, we would say that we share your frustration.
Well, Mr. Chair. So thank you for that. I think we have a lot of new members on this committee, and I just wanted to make sure they all understood that in 2019, because it's the same frustration I had then, I have now, and I appreciate that you have indeed tightened it up a little bit on the application process, had some consequences, and followed through on this, because just letting that sit there. Lessons learned, but it's learned at taxpayers' expense. And so we just want to make sure moving forward that we have a much tighter rein on some of these programs. And I do recognize that these were from 2010. And at that time, there was a push to open up, bring businesses. It was after the Great Recession. And so there was some need to move forward. But again, people need to be held accountable. So thank you for that. And thank you, Mr. Chair, for the question.
Thank you, Assemblywoman Titus. You can go real deep down a rabbit hole on this one. It's really, there's an interesting history with the Gibbons administration and the Office of Energy during that time. And some of these folks are still around. So thank you for answering that question. Thank you for Dr. Titus for asking the question. Assemblyman Watts, do you have a question on this budget?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. I have two questions. I'll make them as brief as I can. Going back to the competitive grant program, you mentioned this grant for tribal energy resilience, and I think you just mentioned that you have some other plans, and you noted there's, in your slide deck, there's a few different specific areas, but I was wondering if the agency's identified other focus areas for future rounds of grant funding.
Thank you, Assemblyman Watts, for that question. The agency is working on identifying specific targeted grants for our next round of solicitation. We believe that there are plenty of targeted options that can cover the goals of this new grant program, which would include providing grant opportunities within renewable energy and energy efficiency, grid modernization and energy resilience, energy storage and innovative clean energy technologies, energy education and workforce development, as well as climate change initiatives and transportation transformation. We have some ideas, and we are working on getting a new series of funding opportunities sort of vetted out so that we can release them coming up in the next few months.
Thank you very much for that clarification. I appreciate that. I also appreciate that this first round is focused on historically marginalized communities and promoting equity as well as falling within those areas that you listed. So thank you for that. My other question is about the Clean Energy Fund and specifically on the budget aspect of it. I think you gave a great update on where things are at right now. Do you anticipate additional funding from GOE will be needed to support the fund beyond that $400,000 in repurposed ARA funds and beyond fiscal year 22?
Thank you for that question, Assemblywoman Watts. No, the agency does not anticipate that there would be funds needed beyond what was allocated for those initial startups. The goal of NCEF is always that it be a standalone and fully sustainable entity. And GOE is looking forward to, along with the board members, I'm sure, of this separate entity, to the work of the incoming executive director and the funding that he can bring to the fore. I also would mention that in August, when Director Bobzian came before IFC to request these funds, he did mention the opportunities that might be presented should there be a change in administration, and the work that had been done around legislation proposing a national clean energy fund, national green bank. We do think that effort will be continuing at the federal level, and look forward to some hoped for funding opportunities to support the work of green banks nationally. through a national green bank and national initiative for these types of funding and finance opportunities.
Thank you for that clarification. And again, thank you to the office for helping get this fund off the ground. I know when we first created it, we didn't allocate any funding towards it. And so I'm appreciative for finding some funds that we can use to get this started. And hopefully once we do so, it'll be able to sustain itself and grow and help support some of these important projects in our community. That's all the questions that I had, Mr. Chair. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, could I provide some additional information on that front?
Please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. David Loebsack for the record. Assemblyman Watts, totally agree with what Deputy Director Taylor provided. I also additionally want to highlight that we will be making an announcement shortly about the hire of the new executive director. And that person, their work plan will be tasked with trying to find operating funds to come in after the state investment is done. I very much appreciate the Interim Finance Committee allocating the money last time when we presented on this topic 2 years ago. I made it very clear that I saw the need for a 2-year investment, and then we were done. And so we have had that conversation at the board level with the fund throughout all the conversations. There will be robust fundraising to private foundations and other sources to fill in after the state's incubation support is there. But I take very seriously the pledge that I made 2 years ago and continue that pledge is that we are done once we have spent our money, and then it'll be others' responsibility to step in and fill the void.
Thank you for that clarification. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Assemblyman. Aura, the gift that keeps on giving. So I think that is the last question we have for the budget, for this budget, and for the Governor's Office of Energy today. So thank you for the presentation, and thank you for answering all of our questions. And we'll be following up with you, either members or staff, if we have further questions.
Thanks, Chair. Thanks, members of the committee.
Thanks, Chair. Thanks, members of the committee.
Thank you. And so that brings us to our last budgets, and that is from the Legislative Council Bureau. And there is a handout that was provided. We got it last night from the Legislative Council Bureau that has some of the budget information in it. And I think that Director Erdos will be presenting this morning. Is that correct? Director Erdos, you're muted.
Thank you, Chair Brooks. I'd like to introduce you all to Dan Rushin, the LCB Chief Financial Officer. He has quickly mastered the LCB accounting programs and has also been able to use both Basin and NEBS, and is I'm going to ask Dan to walk you through our budget presentation today, which will include LCB, Legislative Commission and Committees, SPO, and with the accord of the Chief Clerk and of the Assembly and the Secretary of the Senate, the Interim Senate Assembly budgets as well. Dan and I will both be available to answer questions that you might have. Dan, would you like to proceed?
Yes. Can everybody hear me? Okay.
We can hear you, Dan. You're a little bit muted, though. If you could be either loud or close, that would be better.
Okay. Let's see. Is that better?
So far, so good.
Okay. I'd like to start off today. For the record, my name is Dan Rushin, Chief Financial Officer for the Legislative Council Bureau. I'm here to present and discuss the budget for the 2021-2023 biennium. I don't really have any slides to share for this presentation, but as you referenced, there should be a memo for everyone to hopefully follow along. Certainly, if any questions come up, just feel free to stop me at any time. Specifically, today we'll be talking about 3 budget accounts, 327-2631, 327-2626, and 741-1330. The LCB's operations are recorded in these three separate accounts, which segregate the various functions of the agency. The LCB itself consists, of course, of the Legislative Commission, the administrative staff of the Interim Senate and Assembly, the State Printing Office, and then there are 5 divisions within the Bureau itself. Budget account 2631 is utilized to account for the operations of the 5 divisions, the Legislative Commission, and the other committees that meet during the interim between legislative sessions. The 5 divisions are the Administrative Division, the Audit Division, Fiscal Analysis Division, Legal Division, and the Research Division. Budget account 2626 is utilized to account for the operations of the Interim Senate and Assembly. And then budget account 1330 is utilized to account for the operations of the State Printing Office. Before we get into the details of what comprises this biennium's budget, I just wanted to kind of briefly go over the current status of it and obviously the process that was used to prepare it. The budget itself was completed in late December, and the Legislative Commission subsequently authorized the director to submit the budget to the Governor's Finance Office for inclusion in the executive budget. It's important to note, though, that the Commission did not approve the budget itself, but rather approved the submission of it so that it could be considered by the money committees that meet during the legislative session. So, and I don't know if any of you had received the pages from the executive budget that include it, but it is in the legislative branch section. Regarding the preparation process itself, for those of you that have seen previous LCB budgets, this one is probably going to look quite a bit different. For starters, there are far fewer decision units reflected in the detail of the budget. The decision unit is basically, as you know, a mechanism that segregates changes to the base budget that result from specific actions or decisions. The starting point for the budget is the base budget, and basically the decision units then make changes that can subsequently be reversed if needed. The reason for the far fewer decision units for this biennium is due to the fact that this budget was prepared from a completely different approach than the previous biennium due to the economic environment that we find ourselves in. In November of 2020, all of the state agencies received a communication from the Governor's Finance Office stating that due to the economic hardships our state was facing from the COVID-19 pandemic, our budgets would need to reflect a budget reserve target, which was in essence a reduction in the budgeted appropriations for both fiscal years of the biennium. This budget reserve target was initially a specific amount. It was 12% of each agency's respective fiscal year 2021 appropriations amount. So for the LCB, this amount calculated to approximately $8.8 million for the entire biennium, or obviously 4.4 for each fiscal year. Like many state agencies, the LCB's operating expenditures primarily consist of personnel costs. In fact, our personnel costs account for almost 90% of our total operating expenditures in any given fiscal year. While we do manage some facilities, the long-term capital maintenance costs of those facilities are not included in this operating budget, and we are not discussing them today. Therefore, the only operating costs that we could really look to reduce to meet this budget reserve target were things like travel and training, and in some cases, contract services. But basically, the majority of the budget reserve target was going to, just by its very nature, going to have to be personnel costs. So one of the things we first looked at was implementing a furlough for all employees and all divisions of the LCB, a 24-day furlough, basically 1 day for each month of both fiscal years. When we calculated this out, this got us to about $2.2 million in reduced expenditures and, of course, corresponding appropriations. So we still kind of had a long way to go. We looked at eliminating some positions and other things of that nature, but thankfully, before we had to make any additional measures, we were informed by the Governor's Finance Office that the budget reserve target was being reconsidered in light of some recent economic data that they had been reviewing. So they told us that we could basically reduce that target by approximately half. So in the end, by reducing from the base budget the operating expenditures related to travel, training, contract services, things of that nature, and the implementation of this 24-day furlough, we were able to meet that target. So the appropriations that are in this this budget are approximately 6% less than the previous biennium. In total, it accounts to about $4.2 million less. So that being said, that's the background. That was the approach we took. So basically, it's going to look a lot. There's going to be a lot less detail in this budget than the previous one. So moving on, I'd like to go through each division in each segment of budget account, starting with budget account 2631. Before I go in, are there any questions? Okay. So for budget account 2631, that includes the Legislative Commission and all the various committees that meet in the interim between sessions. This base budget also includes funding for the annual independent audit of the LCB's financial statements and certain contract services provided by sign language interpreters, and when they're needed for committee meetings. It also includes the travel costs for the meetings of the statutory committees and the interim studies and things of that nature. It's important to note that there were some reductions in this part of the budget related to travel, going with the assumption that most of the meetings, if they can, will be conducted via video conference. It's also worthy to note that in an effort to meet our target, we didn't include any additional amounts for new interim committees should they be created during the session. So bear that in mind, that if any new committees or studies are created by legislation, they will require additional funding. So the base budget for this section of the budget account accounts for approximately $237,000 for fiscal year 2022 and $185,000 for fiscal year 2023. Moving on to the administrative division, this is one of the largest divisions in the LCB. It provides operating and technical support to all the other LCB divisions, as well as the legislature itself. It comprises our accounting department, the audio and video communications department, information technology, provides for the maintenance of buildings and grounds, the legislative police, and also includes the director's office. So this budget currently has 93 full-time equivalent permanent positions, and let's see. I just wanted to reiterate the fact that this budget does not include the major maintenance projects that are included in a separate budget request referred to as the one-shot. So the administrative division called for appropriations of approximately $11.1 million for fiscal year 2022 and $11.3 million for fiscal year 2023. This was subsequently reduced by implementing, again, the aforementioned furlough, 24-day furlough, which was calculated in Decision Unit E681. The furlough reduced appropriations and expenditures by about $316,000 in fiscal year 22 and $320,000 in fiscal year 23. In addition, there was another decision unit applied that reduced one full-time equivalent position to half-time, which resulted in some additional savings that are referenced in the memo. Next division I wanted to discuss is the audit division. The audit division, of course, performs audits of the executive and judicial branches of the state government as part of the legislature's oversight responsibility for public programs. The audit division also ensures that an audit of the Nevada state government's federal programs is conducted each year, known as the single audit. That audit is necessary to ensure the continued funding of federal programs at the state level. The audit division has 32 full-time equivalent permanent positions. They addressed some of their budget reserve requirements by reducing, wherever possible, travel and training costs from the base budget. And then in addition to that, of course, the decision unit E681 for the furlough was applied to the audit division as well. The base budget include appropriations of about $4.4 million for fiscal year 2022 and $4.5 million for fiscal year 23 for the support of the audit division. And the furlough decision unit produced savings of about $138,000 for fiscal year 22 and $140,000 for fiscal year 23. Next division is the Fiscal Analysis Division. This division provides the legislature with the capability for independent review and analysis of budgetary, tax, and fiscal matters. It examines the budget, suggests possible adjustments, and provides expenditure and revenue analysis to aid the legislative money and tax and revenue committees. It's also responsible for providing administrative support and revenue projections for the Economic Forum and for ensuring that fiscal notes are provided for legislation as required by law. The Fiscal Analysis Division has currently 29 full-time equivalent permanent positions. And then to address the budget reserve that we previously discussed, the furlough decision unit was applied to them as well. The base budget for the fiscal division was provided for appropriations of approximately $4.2 million in fiscal year 22 and 23, and the furlough decision unit reduced those expenditures by about $130,000 in 22 and 23. Then we move on to the legal division, which is one of the larger divisions in terms of staffing for the LCB, obviously. The legal division drafts bills, resolutions, and legal opinions. It provides committee counsel for all interim studies and most standing legislative committees. The division drafts and reviews regulations and serves as legal advisor to the legislature and other divisions of the LCB. The legal division also codifies and publishes the Nevada Revised Statutes and Nevada Administrative Code, state agency pamphlets, and several compilations of selected portions of the statutes. The legal division produces an electronic version of the statutes and regulations and other publications titled under the official Nevada Law Library. The division also produces and distributes the bill draft resolution list and the Register of Administrative Regulations. The budget for the legal division includes funding for 78 full-time equivalent permanent positions. To address the budget reserve, in addition to the application of the furlough, which we discussed, the legal division reduced its budgeted expenditures for the 2021-2023 biennium by reducing travel and training expenditures where possible, and also costs associated with printing the Nevada Revised Statute sets were removed from the operating budget and will now be charged to the legislative session that relates to those changes. The base budget for the legal division provided for appropriations of approximately $10.1 million for fiscal year 22 and $10.2 million for fiscal year 23. The furlough decision unit resulted in a reduction of appropriations and expenditures of about $338,000 in fiscal year 22 and $341,000 in fiscal year 23. In addition, there was another decision unit applied to the legal division that reduced 2 full-time equivalent positions to half-time and actually eliminated 1 position in fiscal year 23. This produced additional savings of approximately $97,000 in fiscal year 22 and almost $200,000 in fiscal year 23. And finally, we move on to the research division. The research division is the general information and service arm of the legislature. It conducts research into a wide variety of subjects at the request of legislators, committees, and other state, local officials, as well as citizens. It also responds to inquiries concerning Nevada's government laws and public policy from residents, counterpart agencies, and public officials in other states. Division employees also provide primary staff reports for most standing committees and some statutory and interim committees. The base budget for the research division includes funding for 47 full-time equivalent permanent positions. And before the application of the decision unit, the furlough decision unit, the division addressed the budget reserve by reducing their travel and training expenditures where possible. And in addition to that, 3 intermittent positions were eliminated from their base budget. The base budget called for appropriations of approximately $5.6 million for fiscal year 22 and 23. The furlough decision unit produced savings of about $193,000 in fiscal year 22 and 23. And then additionally, they did reduce 1 full-time equivalent position to a 3/4 time position which resulted in some additional savings there. So that was basically the detail of budget account 2631. Any questions before we would move on to budget account 2626?
Thank you, Mr. Russian. I do believe maybe we'll start with a question from Speaker Frierson.
Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And it's not really I appreciate you recognizing me. I really wanted to just at the outset acknowledge all of the hard work that LCB has done to adapt during these unusual times, whether it's adapting and making sure that our staff are trained up on this new virtual existence, coordinating with DHHS and OSHA, as well as providing testing and temperature checks for members of this body and for staff. The focus has always been to create a safe work environment for everybody in this building. And I have been blown away at how much work has been done to try to accommodate both not only legislators and staff and the concern about making sure that staff are safe, but they've always kept access to the public as a priority as well, and encouraging us to find ways to adapt. And I think that we have done so, largely expanding it to give folks that are not within driving distance equal access to this process. So I really just wanted to acknowledge, in light of all of these cuts and adjustments, that LCB has just done a yeoman's job of making sure that we're able to function and do so in a flexible manner. So considering all of the adjustments that we're just talking about today, I just wanted to thank LCB and acknowledge all of that work.
Okay, thank you. Budget account 2626 is used to...
Mr. Russian, before you move on, did any of the other members have any other questions or statements?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, this is Assemblywoman Carlton. If I could ask a brief question.
Please do.
Thank you. I can speak faster than I can type, so I apologize for that. So is this the appropriate time for us to have a conversation about the furloughs?
For the record, this is Dan Russian. Yes, we could discuss the furlough. The furlough does apply to all the budget accounts, including the state printing office in 1330, which we haven't gone over yet. But yes.
Okay.
Certainly, if you have any questions.
And I appreciate that, Mr. Chairman, and I just want to put on the record that, you know, we've been in these positions before where we've had to make some really, really tough decisions, and I know that everybody here values our staff greatly. We brag about our staff all over the country. We have, I believe, the best legislative council bureau that there is. We have always gotten awards and been way ahead of the curve. I know these were very, very difficult decisions. We've seen in a lot of other budgets, a lot of vacancies, layoffs, and just discontinuing of positions. So I think having the conversation about how we came to the furloughs, even though no one wants to ask someone to take a furlough, because in essence, it is a pay cut. We've been there before. But I think it would be good for us to have that conversation now about why the furloughs are a better choice than vacancies or possible layoffs. So if Mr. Rushton or Ms. Erdos, if either one of you would just like to address that, I think it would be good for us to have that on the record.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm happy to address the furlough issue. What we looked at, especially when we were considering that we were going to make a 12% cut, it really had a very dramatic effect. Again, because as Dan indicated, over 90% of our budgets are people, and there's not much that we can do about that. And if you look at the staffing of the Legislative Council Bureau, as well as the interim Senate Assembly, what you see is a pretty slim especially compared to other states, force of people to work. And I would also point out that many of the divisions, legal, fiscal, actually all of them, but have a fairly high amount of overtime, both clearly in the lead up to session and during session, but also for legal and especially fiscal this past biennium, we saw quite a bit of overtime that was, I believe, absolutely necessary to get through this past interim, and we've had a fair amount of overtime in additional in the other interims as well. And I think that what maybe has happened here is that the LCB has not really ever recovered as much as maybe some of the other agencies have, and that's just my basic observation in terms of staffing going forward, and that's for many reasons, not the least of which has been space and issues and things like that, but also being careful with the budget. And our concern is that even cutting one or two positions in especially small divisions like the fiscal division really results in basically just more work for the people who are already working there, and frankly, most of whom are working overtime to meet the demands of the legislature. And I'm not sure that this is the best way to approach this, but it is certainly the best way that we could find to more spread this across our employees, so that we're not actually losing employees whose task will have to be picked up by other people. We didn't really find any service areas or things like that we really felt like we could suggest cutting in this climate. And in fact, truly with some of the other issues that have come up, including COVID, as well as we've had many more gatherings in the legislative grounds during this whole interim, and we are advised that those kinds of things will continue. So we're just not seeing the ability to cut the job itself. In addition to the additional IFC meetings that were had during this last biennium, fiscal is dealing with two new heads of that division, which is a tough space to be in, losing both at the same time. Legal is in the same position with the new division chief. Hopefully I'm helping out there. But we also are seeing a large number of regulations during the interim for legal, so they're having much more difficult time. If you look at our indicators of workload and the things that we try to meet, which is that standard of getting regulations back in 30 days, we are nowhere near where we'd like to be in terms of getting those regs back as quickly as administrative agencies are by statute supposed to be able to expect to get them back. We just have a tremendous workload, and we didn't see where we could cut that workload, and felt that spreading, by using furloughs to spread it across the divisions would be the best way to go. The same was true really for the interim Senate and Assembly. They have very small staffs, and cutting people there just didn't seem possible at all. So I guess that's the basics of how we got to the furlough decision.
And thank you very much, Mr. Chair. And if I could just do a real brief follow-up. We're kind of wondering about the CARES Act dollars. A lot of this work seems to be related to the pandemic. I know there's some smart people in fiscal that will figure out if we can access some of those dollars or how we can move forward. We know there's another round of funding possibly coming. I'm hoping that every opportunity will be taken to investigate that. We know how valuable our staff is, and believe me, I can totally relate to all the IFC meetings and all the work that was done there. I've got to know the fiscal staff very, very well last summer, and I'll never be able to thank them enough for all of the work that they did. So I'm hoping we can find a resolution for this in the future so that we can keep the standard of work that we've grown to appreciate, to be able to keep it there and to make sure that our LCB folks have the opportunity to do the work that they're passionate about. So thank you very much, Ms. Erdos.
Thank you, Chair Carlton, and thank you, Director Erdos, for the answer. Anyone else have any questions before we move on? 626. Right, I see none. So, Mr. Russian, if you could present Budget 2626, please.
Very good. Thank you, Mr. Chair. For the record, Dan Russian. Budget account 2626, as I said, accounts for the activities of the interim Senate and Assembly. There's basically 4 full-time equivalent positions in each of those houses for fiscal year 22. That reduces to 3 full-time equivalent positions in the subsequent fiscal year 2023, as that position is then funded by the respective session. The base budget for both houses totaled approximately $970,000 for fiscal year 22 and $800,000 for fiscal year 23. Again, as we discussed, the furlough was applied to this part of our budget as well and produced about $30,000 of savings in fiscal year 22 and about $25,000 in fiscal year 23. There were other cuts made, although they were fairly small, just because the budgets themselves were very small, related to travel and training in those areas as well. Would there be any questions on this budget account before we round things out with the state printing office?
Hold on, please, Mr. Russian. Any of the members have any questions? I do not see any in my 5 computer screens in front of me right now. I do not believe so, Mr. Russian, so you can head on to the next budget.
All right, thank you, Mr. Chair. Finally, to round things out, the state printing office, which is the activities and operations are recorded in budget account 1330. It's important to note that the printing office does not receive any appropriations from the state general fund. It's funded from the sale of publications to other state agencies and local governments in Nevada. Obviously, the sale of printed materials. This budget includes 19 full-time equivalent permanent positions for the next biennium. The revenues from printing sales are budgeted at approximately $3 million for each year of the biennium. I did think it was worth noting that even though this particular division of the Bureau does not receive any appropriations, the furlough is still being applied to it as well, though basically for the sake of equity. The furlough resulted in a reduction of expenditures of about $58,000 for each year, each fiscal year of the next biennium. And that basically rounds out my overview of the 2023 biennium budget.
Mr. Russian, did I miss budget 2630, interim finance committee?
Mr. Chair, for the record, Dan Russian, that budget account was not on the agenda. It was my understanding we wouldn't be presenting that particular budget account at this particular meeting. Similarly, we won't be presenting the capital budget, the one-shot appropriation, as I previously mentioned.
Okay, thank you. Do any of the members have any questions on the last budget? I see none. See what happens when you're right before lunch, Mr. Russian? I see no questions, so I going once, going twice. So I appreciate the presentation this morning and appreciate the information you sent over last night and everything that y'all do to keep us safe and to keep the state of Nevada running. So I appreciate that. And with that, we are closed with this agenda item. Thank you, Director Erdos. Thank you, Mr. Russian. And that we will move on to our last agenda item. And our last agenda item is public comment. And broadcast services, do you think that you could please make sure that the lines are open? And let's give them a minute. Any public that wanted to call in and comment, give them a minute to call in.
Certainly, Chair Brooks. Thank you so much. We are currently on public comment. If you have recently joined the call and would like to provide public comment, please press *9 now to take your place in the queue. Caller last digits 155. Please slowly state and spell your name for the record. You will have 2 minutes and may begin.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and members of the committee. For the record, my name is Christy Cabrera, CHRISTI CABRERA. I'm the Policy and Advocacy Director for the Nevada Conservation League. NCL wants to thank and recognize the efforts of the Governor's Office of Energy for taking a leadership role on expanding our clean energy economy and reducing our state's carbon emissions. Governor Sisolak released the state climate strategy in December of last year, which lays the groundwork for Nevada to meet the carbon reduction goals outlined in statute and in our agreements as a member of the U.S. Climate Alliance. The Governor's Office of Energy, along with the Department of Conservation and Natural Resources, led the state climate initiative, and the work of the Office of Energy will continue to be crucial in making progress on our goals. Expansion of renewable energy, energy efficiency, transportation electrification, and reducing the use of fossil fuels are all important components, which makes the work of this office so important. As the committee saw in the presentation today, the renewable energy account will not last forever. And it is our hope that this committee and the Governor's Office will start to think about the future of funding for this critical work. Thank you for your time.
Caller with the last 3 digits, 377. Please slowly state and spell your name for the record. You will have 2 minutes and maybe. Caller with the last 3 digits, 377. Please slowly state and spell your name for the record. You will have 2 minutes and may begin.
Chair Brooks and members of the committee, my name is Jane Amone and I'm the External Affairs Director for the Nature Conservancy in Nevada. We are here today to offer a testimony in support of the budget request for the Governor's Office of Energy. GOE has taken leadership on the important issue of tackling climate change, and they serve a critical climate governance function for Nevada. With their administration of the Renewable Energy Fund and Energy Efficiency and Conservation Funds and the projects and programs they support, GOE plays an integral role in our path to a clean energy economy. In addition, GOE is Nevada's Energy Information Administrator, gathering and collating annual metrics about energy generation, use, and consumption in the state. In his presentation, Director Bobbsian touched on the office's engagement with NGOs. The Nature Conservancy is one of those NGOs. We are working with 3 other national NGOs to advance Smart from the Start deployment of renewable energy systems in Nevada. A Smart from the Start energy plan identifies and prioritizes lower impact areas where renewable energy generation, transmission, and storage can be deployed with as little impact as possible to natural lands, cultural resources, recreation, and other conservation values. Over the past year and a half, we have met several times with GOE on how to address this complex issue. They have participated in our online forums, providing information and expert opinion. We appreciate the insight and the ideas they bring to the table and the ongoing engagement and dialogue. We hope that you will fully support their budget request. Thank you for hearing our comment.
Chair, the public line is open and working. There are no other callers at this time.
All right, then. Thank you. So thank you, members of the Joint Committee. With that, we will adjourn today's meeting.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.